Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much for having me here. So the email that went out this week announcing this week's Numen Lumen read, Anthony Hatcher speaks in Numen Lumen tomorrow morning. You are assured of humor, poignant stories, stirring dance, and a small breather in the midst of the stress and struggle of this month. There was some concern among my friends that I was going to dance. I'm really glad it was you and not me. I was thinking about doing my interpretive dance rendition of Spring Bouquet with Pollen, but thought better of it. I am happy to be back for the third time as a speaker in Numen Lumen, and for the second time in this sacred space. The title of my talk today is Fear, Death, Prayer, as opposed to Eat, Pray, Love. And I'd like to begin by sharing two scripture passages with you. Matthew 10:28 reads, "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." 1 Corinthians 16:13, "Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong." Years ago, I applied for a teaching job at Appalachian State University in Boone. At the end of a grueling day-long interview process, a dozen people sat around a huge conference table and asked me a series of questions. I was exhausted and punchy by this time of day, and the only question I really remember is, how do you usually deal with stress? What I wanted to say was that I usually deal with stress by curling up in the fetal position and rocking back and forth until a problem goes away. Instead, I told them that I face stress head on and try to resolve an issue causing the stress. I got the job offer, which I declined for various reasons. I sometimes sweat the small stuff, but strangely, when big stuff happens, a calm comes over me. Once in pre-cell phone days, and I realize that's very scary to think of for many people in this room who are much younger than I am, but in no cell phone days, I had a wreck late at night on a dirt road. It was pitch black, no lights around. I was okay, but I couldn't get my little Honda Civic out of a ditch. So I stepped out of the car and stood there, and then I suddenly heard in the darkness, Now, I was brought up in a small town, not on a farm, and my first thought was, I swear, do cows bite? After I realized what a stupid thought that was, I started hiking, found some houses, knocked on doors, and finally was rescued by a very generous man with a tractor who pulled my car back onto the road. I'd love to tell you that at times like that, when a situation seems bleak, I always say a prayer and know that God is beside me. But I suspect I'm just so puzzled by my circumstances that I'm too numb or too dumb to get upset. Recently, Chaplain Fuller said in a meditation before a faculty meeting that she wanted people around here, when asked how they're doing, to stop saying busy. Well, workloads can cause stress. But we at Elon also know how to pause, and we know how to pause to grieve when necessary. This week, we lost a member of the Elon family. I didn't know auto mechanic Ed Watkins, but everything I hear about and read about this man paints him as a decent, caring, and beloved individual. The burden we feel, the stress at his passing, cannot be easily remedied. How does one deal with the news of sudden death? And how does one deal with long-term illness? Father Jerry, our Catholic campus minister, who has comforted so many in times of crisis, deals with the sickness of his father with dignity and grace. I have long admired Jerry, and I try to follow his example. The last time I gave a Numen Lumen address, I spoke at length about my younger brother, Dana. Dana survived cancer of the eyes at age 8, suffered through repeated operations in his 20s after nearly severing his left arm in a fall. And for the past 6 years, he's been dealing with sarcoma. After 3 operations to remove cancers from his leg and chest, he is now living with 5 tumors in his lungs. One lung is partially collapsed, and he runs out of breath easily. He's had chemotherapy and radiation and is now on an experimental pill called Votrient. If you look up this horrible drug on your smartphone, you'll have to scroll and scroll to reach the bottom of the side effects list. On Easter Sunday, Dana was on a cane to steady himself, and though he's 5 years younger than I am, he looked like a sick old man. I also mentioned in my last talk about Dana's sustaining sense of humor, and also about how public he is about his illness. There's a long string of Facebook entries that he posts that make up an online journal of sorts, alerting the world of each new incident in his life, such as when he had to be rushed to the ER on Monday night because of breathing problems. But in one lighter Facebook entry, he noted that many people in this world face illness and death with quiet dignity, never complaining, never talking about how difficult life is, never uttering a cross word. He wrote that after he's gone, his wife Marty will say, "Yeah, he wasn't like that." Dana is maintaining at the moment, just trying not to let the cancer grow. He uses a Cold War analogy to describe this approach. He calls it containing the communists. You know they're not going to change, but you don't have to let them spread. As some of you may know, I had the good fortune to travel recently with some wonderful Elon students to Hong Kong. We covered the Internet Hall of Fame ceremony. At communal meals in restaurants, 2 of the students never failed to ask a blessing. Not as a big show of piety, but quietly and with a humble spirit. I commended them both for walking the walk of their faith, not being afraid of odd looks or public ridicule. On our last day in Hong Kong, we visited the Big Buddha, which is a gigantic Buddha statue on a mountaintop by a Buddhist monastery. Most people there were tourists, but some came to pray. These individuals prayed openly, ignoring the crowd around them. One woman prostrated herself on the concrete in the midst of the crowd. As I stood there at the base of a huge Buddha on a Hong Kong hilltop, my first thought was, I have come a long way from my rural Southern Baptist upbringing in North Carolina. My second thought was, I'm now ready for prayer. And I'm ready to face my fears about death and about life. Thank you.